I just got back from the cinemas just a few minutes ago, and I just got back from seeing Disney's Zootopia from cinemas, and I've got 3 words about it. I loved it. This is a fantastic movie. My initial reactions to the movie when seeing the teaser trailers and all that stuff, it looked like some sort of interesting movie, like some sort of mediocre, fun little kids movie, sort of like that. And that's all I really thought that the movie was going to be like. Then I saw Chris Duckman's extremely positive review of the movie, and I thought to myself, wow, if the movie is that good, I have to see this movie. And I actually went to a preview screening to this movie. Here in Australia, it actually hasn't come out completely yet. It actually opens next week. However, I actually paid to see a preview screening for this movie, so I actually saw it the very first day it's come out here in Australia. So I actually went to see a preview screening for this movie just so I could see this movie as soon as I possibly can, and it did not disappoint. Zootopia follows a body named Judy Hopps, and she dreams of being a police officer one day. And eventually, she actually succeeds. She becomes a police officer, and she goes and joins this city called Zootopia, a city where predators and prey all get along. The only problem is that Judy is a rabbit, and it's very uncommon. In fact, it's impossible for a rabbit to become a police officer. And so that is where there are some amazing elements in this movie are revealed. The trailers and everything of the movie make it look like some sort of just kiddie fun movie just for little kids and so. However, it is a lot more than that. This movie actually explores lots of elements. It has a lot to say about the way we live in, because the movie is very close to our social, because these places like Zootopia, all the animals, they walk around on 2 feet, they wear clothes, they use technology like iPhones. It's basically our world that we live in, only instead of being humans, it's rhinos, foxes, lions, and bunnies. This movie is fantastic on so many levels. For starters, one thing I loved about this movie is that its animation. Not only is it breathtaking, it's really great, it's lush, it's very environmental. When it's raining, you can see a lot of definition in the wetness of the fur. And the animation not only looks great, but I love how what they did with it is that they actually had the animals adjusted and animated to scale. And so when Judy is looking up at a rhino or an elephant, they are towering over her. Or when she's in a little tower full of mouse, she suddenly looks like a giant. All the animals are actually designed to scale, and that actually has a major part on the story, because this movie is about being judgmental, being racist, sexist. It establishes lots of stereotypes, drugs. Seriously, the fact that it's establishing all these problems, it really feels like a movie aimed for teenagers and adults, only in disguise as a kids movie. In fact, one of the best ways I can sell is by comparing it to last year's Inside Out. If you've been with my channel for a while, you may know that Inside Out is my favourite movie of all time. And while I don't think this movie is quite as good as Inside Out, it's got a lot of the qualities. It's deep, and it's very metaphoric, and it's got a lot of aspects that kids wouldn't understand. In fact, I don't think a lot of kids are going to understand what this movie's about the stereotypes, the racism, the drugs, that sort of thing. But I also love the fact that this movie is just as funny, if not funnier, than Inside Out. There are some fantastic characters. Nick Wilde, the fox, Judy Hopps, the bunny, these are fantastic characters. I actually would love to see a sequel to Zootopia just to see more of these characters. I love these guys. This movie also involves a sloth, and while he's not a very major character, he's stereotypical, yes, but he is one of the funniest characters I've ever seen in an animated movie in my life. The movie actually uses the scale, the stereotypes, and all this stuff to incorporate its humor. And the movie is very funny. This is a very funny movie. And this movie is also very entertaining. Not only do I get very engaged in its story, but it's also a very funny movie. It has a great sense of humor. This movie is hilarious, and I love how it doesn't use any stupid burping, farting, or pooping or peeing jokes or anything. It actually uses very visual humor, sarcastic humor that's very related to our kind of culture that we live in. There's a lot of jokes in this movie that's funny, but it's funny because it's true kind of way. It uses our culture as its humor. It also uses the scale of the animals as its humor. Its humor is very, very mature, and that is why it is so funny. It makes fun of stereotypes. The humor is great. I love animated movies that use its humor by taking advantage as to what the movie is about. This movie uses its humor as advantage of the scale of the animals, what the overall themes and elements of the movie is about, the fact that this movie is actually about racism and drugs, and it actually uses that kind of element to incorporate its humor, and it's hilarious. Kind of like Disney's Inside Out once again. A lot of the humor from Inside Out was incorporated due to the fact the movie takes place in a mine and it's about emotions, and they used that for the humor of Inside Out, and the same thing happens again for Zootopia. I saw this movie in a previous screening, but when it opens wide in Australia later on this week, if you live in Australia, when this movie opens wide next week, I strongly recommend this movie, and take your kids, they might think it's a fun movie. I think this movie is really aimed for teenagers and adults. Again, it's just in disguise as a kids movie. The only reason why I don't say that Zootopia is as good as Disney's Inside Out is just because I do have a couple of problems with it. I have 3 main problems with Zootopia that overall sort of do weigh it down from being as good as Inside Out. But I will say it comes really damn close. So what are the 3 flaws? Well, the first one is the opening scene. I knew that this movie was going to be mature about the racism and drugs and all that stuff, but I only knew about all that stuff because I saw Chris Duckman's review. I knew about that stuff going in, and I heard it was really good, so that's why I went to see it, and I wasn't disappointed. However, a friend of mine came to see this movie with me, and he loved it just as much as I did. However, he actually wasn't too sure about it because the opening scene really feels like it gives a bad impression, because while the overall movie is very mature, the first movie feels like it's more of a kidding movie, and it's mainly because the movie starts off with 9-year-olds, and it doesn't suit the tone of the rest of the movie, and it feels like it's going to be a more kiddie movie, but then once the plot overall kicks in, then all the mature stuff comes in, and it becomes a fantastic movie. My second problem with the movie is between the second and third acts, because there is a bit of a cliche that was used in the movie, and it's because of that one cliche that was used that actually sort of grinds the transition between the second and third act to a halt a little bit, and I feel like that it weighed that bit down, and I could see where that bit was going, and going, okay, come on, this is a bit cliche, come on, and then eventually picks back up again going, okay, that's fine. Just felt like that bit kind of weighed the movie down a little bit, and it does weigh the movie down a little tiny bit, but then once the cliche is over established and the cliche sort of ends, and then the movie quickly picks back up again, it becomes a lot of fun. Although, I will honestly say, there's quite a few elements during the climax of the movie that I thought were very similar to the action movie Speed, and if I was giving some spoilers, I'd explain what I meant by that. I find it very coincidental that this movie reminded me of Speed in the climax, and yet I just reviewed that movie a couple weeks ago. And my third problem, and this is probably my biggest problem with the movie, and that's the advertising. The marketing of the movie makes it look like this sort of little kid kind of movie. Like, it's really aimed for young children about foxes and lions and that sort of thing, and it's just sort of like for little kids, and it's just going to be moderately good or something like that. And I feel like that actually might hurt the movie's sales, because people will probably think that's just going to be a kiddie movie and ignore it and just move on. Trust me, this is not a kiddie movie. It may seem like it within the first scene of the movie, but the movie does pick up, and it's actually a really mature movie. Don't miss this movie. The trailer is very misleading. This movie is very, very mature, and I highly don't recommend that you miss this movie. Please, see this movie when it comes out here in Australia wide, because it's a really fun movie. I will be sure to buy this on DVD or Blu-ray, haven't fully decided yet, but I'm guaranteed to get this movie as soon as it comes out, because if I was doing ratings in my reviews, I would give Zootopia my highest rating. It is one of the best animated movies I've ever seen in my life. It's almost as good as Inside Out, which is saying a lot. I love this movie, guys, and I highly recommend you go and see this movie. Hasta la vista, baby.